Hey. Good morning, afternoon, or evening, good people. Wherever you are, where you happen to be, and however we're together. Thanks for being here. I'm Dave, and this is Dave's Head. So, what's in my head? Uh, yeah. P Diddy's got it rough right now. I'm sure by now you've all heard about the arrest, imprisonment of Sean, Puffy, P Diddy, Love, I don't know, what all the other nicknames he's had. Combs. We call him Sean in the hood. I don't know. Sean Puffy Combs, arrested on September 16th on federal charges including sex trafficking and racketeering. Racketeering is one of those charges that, who knows what it really means. It just, if you get racketeering charges, it means you fucked up, basically. Um, Now, some say it was a long time coming. If you go back to the various incidents that have hit or been impacted or a part of the circle of P. Diddy, go back to Biggie's death. There's some people that blame Biggie's death on Diddy. His ex, Kim Porter. There are people, I believe, Al B. Sure might be one of the people asking now for that to be opened back up as far as investigation. And most notably, recently anyway, Cassie and the abuse that was actually caught on camera, turned into the authorities, albeit way late, because apparently Diddy paid somebody off to keep the footage from reaching the proper authorities. But irregardless, outside of the statute of limitations, which is always interesting to me, the concept of statute of limitations. Meaning if you do something and you're not prosecuted for it within a certain amount of time, then you basically get away with it. So in this instance, I believe it was 10 years. I'm guessing here, but basically says, I'm using that example. If Diddy wasn't prosecuted for blatant, documented, evidence proven abuse of Cassie within 10 years, again, just an example, 10 years, then statute of limitations applies. You can't prosecute him for that. Sorry for your luck. Now, it does not apply to, say, civil suits, which is why Cassie was able to extract some money out of the situation. I don't say extract in a bad way. I say extract as far as the factual what happened. And he apologized for whatever that's worth. But yeah, I mean, caught on tape that, I wonder if the person who withheld that tape for that money, and I'm guessing, say 25 G's, right? I don't know what the amount was, but back then, probably not a lot of money. I don't know. But maybe enough for them to not destroy the tape, by the way. Because if you're going to keep the tape, might as well take the money and turn the tape in. Just a thought. But he's currently in a special place of New York hell right now, or the MDC, which stands for Metropolitan Detention Center, which is notoriously a bad living condition wise, even for prisoners, whether guilty, not guilty. If you're being held on federal charges, you're likely going to go there, because the other one, I believe, was shut down a couple years ago after, I think, some celeb committed suicide. Was it Epstein? Might have been Epstein. I don't know who it was. Committed suicide at the other one that's in New York. And so they have him at this one, the MDC. And what's interesting, left and right, and I don't mean political, I mean literally left and right, celebrities are tripping over themselves to disassociate themselves from P. Diddy. And there are people who don't even want to talk about the parties. They were all about these parties before, but suddenly they're disassociating themselves. And my biggest thing about this, and I can't remember who said it, because if you go look on social media, it's either DL Hughley or Eddie Griffin who are just going bananas right now about this topic. But I agree that there's a notion or a number of good people who likely are accomplices to whatever these alleged crimes are, and all the array of alleged crimes. They're accomplices. They enjoyed the parties. They enjoyed the sexual acts that were part of those parties. They enjoyed seeing or participating in the victimage of those who were at the parties, repeatedly and repeatedly and repeatedly. And now, only now, are people starting to run their mouth or just run and hide. But this reminds me of the obvious R. Kelly, right? Almost the same situation. I mean, granted, R. Kelly was a little bit different, but there are a number of people who should be in jail right along with R. Kelly. And I'll go out there on a limb and say some of them should be the parents, because they use their children to gain access to R. Kelly, his money, the pomp and circumstance, and everything else. And then they cried after the fact when they didn't get exactly what they want. Meanwhile, their daughter is in the web of R. Kelly, used, abused, and I'm not being funny, but in these situations their parents put them in or allow them to stay in or be in. And there was no care or concern for these victims, quote unquote victims, because, guilty until proven innocent, or innocent until proven guilty. Sorry, said that backwards facetiously. But there was no care or concern for those victims, right? You got to use quotes until they were found guilty. At least you should think that way. But now all of a sudden there's outrage. Now all of a sudden there's, repercussions. Oh, and there's a video by Dr. Umar, who I've never talked about him on my podcast, I think in 5 seasons. It may be the first time. I have to go back and check. I'm pretty sure it's the first time, because I have my personal feelings about things that he said and his beliefs and all that stuff. We're not going to get into some of the beef I have with him. But he turned this into a conspiracy theory with Diddy. And I go back to comparing 3 very peculiar situations. P Diddy, R. Kelly, Donald Trump. Evidence found guilty, Donald Trump. Evidence found guilty, R. Kelly. Apparently a bunch of evidence, right? P. Diddy. And so I don't understand how people can look at any of those 3 situations, and if the evidence is rapidly there, right, present, history, rumors for a long time, just nobody acting on them. It's kind of like the person who, robs people in a hood, but you never turn them in because, every once in a while he breaks me off. How we can look at those 3 situations and look at one of those 3 or 2 of those 3 and say, it's a witch hunt. It's a travesty of justice. Either we're for justice, the law, regardless of how slow it is. And trust me, I've been done wrong by the law, so I get it. And actually done wrong, not just made up, done wrong. But how we can look at those 3 situations, say that a jury of their peers, at least in 2 of those cases, found these people guilty after seeing all the evidence that pretty much all of us outside of that jury room did not see. And then immediately jump to the fence of P. Diddy without reading documents, without looking at evidence. And I'm not saying he's guilty. The evidence will say that. The trial will say that. I'm saying there's a whole heck of a lot. Because when you have these situations, you look around and you see all these rats, and I'm using the term loosely, all these rats scattering as the ship starts going down. Something has to be amiss. And from the reputation, blatant reputation. Puffy himself, I keep calling him Puffy because I'm a child of the 90s, that's what it's going to be. But P. Diddy himself is even quoted as saying his parties are going to get him in trouble legally. And so why do we think suddenly when he actually gets in trouble that it's some grand conspiracy? Without actually offering proof, by the way. Which is usually the case when you look at these situations. Whether P. Diddy, R. Kelly, Trump, it's a conspiracy. It's a witch hunt. Okay, show me proof. That's usually what happens. The next thing that's on my mind, or in my head, is a really, really sad story. And the day that I'm actually recording this, I'm recording this a little later than I normally do. Just busy weekend, just getting around to it. Busy life, to tell you the truth. But Marcellus Khaliifah Williams is age 55. Today, he is actually set to be killed by lethal injection. And if you don't know the story, I encourage you to do some research, look it up. I'll give you some here, obviously. But look up his story. Look at the history of the prosecution, post-prosecution, what he's done in jail, the organizations that have come to his defense and said, this isn't right. Just go look it up. And so the Office of St. Louis County Prosecuting Attorney, which originally convicted him, by the way, sought to have his case overturned. The prosecution, let me just say that again, the prosecution has raised concerns about the lack of DNA evidence linking Williams to the 1998 killing of Alicia Gale, and have said that Williams did not get a fair trial. I'm not sure if I underscored this enough. The prosecutors said this. Not the defense, although they have their arguments too. The people that convicted him said, you know what? You might have got this one wrong. But check this out. In August, Williams and prosecutors, the people who convicted him, reached an agreement to halt his execution. He would have to plead no contest to first-degree murder in exchange for a new sentence of life without parole. Now, his lawyers said this agreement was not an admission of guilt, but more so to give him time, because if you're put to death, you don't have time. But give him time to pursue the evidence that proved his innocence. A judge signed off on it. Again, let me go back. Williams, prosecutors, judge. That's cool. We'll sign off on it. Oh, by the way, so did the victim's family. So Williams, judge, prosecutors, the victim's family all signed off on this. But Republican Attorney General Andrew Bailey challenged it. And then the state Supreme Court blocked it. Now, I talk about justice every so often. I've had my run-ins with the law. Just about every single time. Not my fault, really, to tell you the truth. With the exception of one. But the prosecuting attorney in St. Louis, a Democrat now, put a statement out Monday evening. And so, in case you're wondering, this is Tuesday, I'm recording this, so yesterday, that they'll continue to do everything in their power to save his life. Again, this is the prosecuting attorney. He added, even for those who disagree on the death penalty, where there's a shadow of a doubt of any defendant's guilt, the irreversible, punishment of execution should not be an option. Think about that. I mean, this is not a hard concept. This is not differential equations. This is not sending a rocket to the moon. This is simple fact of life. If you sentence me to death, and there is a smidgen of a doubt that I am actually guilty of the crime that you're sending me to death for, it would seem logical. And you don't have to go Spock logical, just any person logical, that the death penalty, the finality of it, the irreversible, I don't know why I keep messing up that word, but irreversible punishment of execution should not be an option. And that's what makes the arbitrary justice system infuriating. How can the prosecutor, the victim's family, a judge, all agree to take him off death row, to just give him life in prison? Which, in theory, gives him time to prove his innocence. Right? I don't know if the Innocence Foundation is working with him, but I know there are multiple organizations working with him. Reading articles, doing research on this topic, there are people out there who've worked with him the last 10 years who now call him mentor. I forget the term, the religious term, but he's like the entire prison's guide or sheik. I don't know what the term is. Right? And this is the person you're executing. Just last week in South Carolina, by the way. Khalil Divine Black Sun Allah, 46, was executed. After the state's main witness, again, this is not the defense. The defense is not even doing the work here. The state's main witness said he had lied during trial and they were executing the wrong person. An innocent man. And they still executed him. Again, the term is beyond a shadow of a doubt, right? Not preponderance of evidence, which is the civil side, I believe. Beyond a shadow of a doubt. If you have any doubt about the guilt of someone you are about to execute in their life, there's no coming back from this. This is not a video game. Then you should not execute them. And to do that makes no sense to me. I can see if somebody just said, hey, I'm guilty. They're just, or not guilty, excuse me. They're just screaming to the heavens, I'm not guilty, I'm not guilty. And there's no workable lane of evidence to pursue, right? Makes total sense. I know it doesn't make total sense, but it makes sense that you would say, hey, there's nothing here. There's no doubt. You haven't provided doubt to us. But we're talking about with the case of Williams, Marcellus Williams, fingerprint, DNA, just not there. Prosecution, the family, a judge already said, you know what? Death is not the answer. There was a commission, by the way, I forgot to mention this. There was a commission put in place to review this. They reviewed it for a couple years. I forget the number of years, but a couple years. As soon as the Republican Attorney General came in, he disbanded the review board and reinstated the execution without explanation. Again, this is with the prosecutor, the family, a judge saying, hold up. With one swell of his pen, ended the review board, put him back on death row. Make it make sense. Sometimes I ask the question why she would care about justice and law. Now, I know there are a lot of people out there claiming to be about justice and claiming to be about law. But there are actual people who walk the face of this earth in this country who actually respect justice and respect the law. But why should we? When situations like this happen. These are just two situations, by the way. There are hundreds, maybe even thousands across the country happening every single year where people were either put to death incorrectly or wrongfully, not incorrectly, wrongfully, or found guilty of crimes they didn't commit. I mean, how many times you hear about somebody wrongfully convicted to get out of jail and somebody says, oh, I know you've been in jail for 40, 50 years. Here's $1.8 million. That should do it. But, sir, I've been in jail for 40 something years. That will never get, 1.8 million is going to fix the time I lost. Now, if you think about the arbitrariness of law and the justice system, think about this. If the letter of the law was followed, there would never be a speeding ticket that you were able to get out of. Race, what you make, none of that. But every single day, police officers somewhere decide to give a ticket to this person and not give a ticket to that person. Because law is arbitrary. It's up to interpretation. What law says if A happens, then B should be the consequences? Think about this. You kill somebody, there are multiple crimes you could be convicted of. It could be murder, could be voluntary manslaughter, could be involuntary manslaughter. It's all about intent, planning. Premeditation is the correct way to put it. But even with all that, you could work the system to turn a murder 1 to a murder 2, to a murder into manslaughter. Right? I think Denzel said it most appropriately in Training Day. It's not what you know, it's what you can prove. But that doesn't seem to be the case in these two cases. Because if it was about what you can prove, I offer proof. In one case, DNA evidence doesn't support the crime and the person who was convicted of it. In the other case, eyewitness testimony no longer supports the conviction of the person who was convicted. And in both cases, someone's going to die when there is actual doubt of whether they were innocent or guilty. Doesn't seem right. What's in My Head is sponsored by Adapt to Adopt. Adapt to Adopt provides recreational support to adopted children and youth through recreational support groups, mentoring programs, sports and community service projects, and more. For more information, visit rebrand.ly/DHPA2A. That's rebrand.ly/DHPA2A. The last thing that's in my head is, first of all, this weekend, after being away for an eventful, and I say that with emphasis, eventful weekend in D.C. and Maryland, let me just say I can't stand people sometimes, and I'm not going to say the word I'm thinking of because I said it enough Friday night. Breaking into cars and stealing someone's hard-earned life just because is despicable. And I'm a firm believer in karma. And we're going to talk about connections and universe and all that stuff. I'm a firm believer in karma. And so I'm leave a nickel on a needle like we used to do back in the day. Slow down time, let karma do her thing, and then come out and be the BIT, you know what, that karma can be for these people. And I really hope that is their fate going forward. Nothing lethal, just that happens to them. You know, eye for an eye thing. Somebody steals something that's very valuable to them. But this weekend coming, we get to babysit my godson and nephew. Now, you may remember prior on an episode, I talked about a time that I babysat, and they left me hacking up 3.5 lungs and curling up on the couch for 2 days or so. It was the opposite of fun. It just wasn't fun. I think about recently, more so or more frequently recently, since my baby brother just had his first child. I have a niece now. Hello. And I would put a picture up there, but I haven't got permission to put that up. Plus, you know, it's a child. I don't want to put pictures of children up. But thinking a lot about the future and me having a child or children. And so I kind of, in many ways, look at this as an opportunity to test my parenting or nurturing abilities, right? Now, I was abused. I mean, I was raised in a time of discipline. Because in the houses I grew up in, they were firm, right? Just firm. I mean, I was raised in a time when the village or the community would raise you, and then take you home for your secondary abuse. Nurturing. And I'm joking, obviously. I was raised in a time where if you did something wrong in the neighborhood, the neighbors would take care of you and then bring you home while you're crying and sobbing and doing that thing. And then you'd get it from mother or father, whoever happened to be home. And you kind of hope sometimes it was the harder one that was home. That way, when the easier one comes home, it's already taken care of. Just listen, we grew up in a different time. But what's pretty cool is, I think, watching my godson and his brother grow, and the times that I've had the pleasure to babysit them or just be around them, um, that I've been channeling my inner back in the day maturity that I had as a teen when I was kind of seeing or overseeing my younger cousins, and they just kind of always looked up to me, right? They always kind of saw me as a father figure. And one of my cousins that I'm close with, very close with, he actually calls me. There's a term for it, but a father, but it's something before that I can't remember right now. Um, so, you know, there's no abuse or discipline, excuse me, needed in these situations, right? Um, I'm able to discuss things with them. I feel like you should talk to children in a way that matures them through conversation, right? To understand, well, you could do this, but these are the consequences. So if you want to take a second and think about the path you want to take, the one of least resistance or the one that's going to be uncomfortable. And you can have those abilities, right? Um, Without abuse that we used to have back in the day. And let's be clear, it was abuse, but it's different times, different strokes, literally, for different folks. Um, I can use inflection in my voice, right? I'm very calm most of the time, but I can get deep voiced, and I can get that look, that look that parents had back in the day. I can just be chilling and excuse me, but you have to distinguish, I think, to the light moments and the serious moments, and I think the inflection in your voice can kind of do that. You can be very lighthearted, and I think your body physically tenses up a little bit when it's a more of an urgent thing, because you want to convey that, hey, let's stop with the games, let's take things seriously, blah blah. Time to do this, time to go to bed. And you have to, you have to be the bad Dave sometime when it's time to go to bed, and they're like, oh, can I please stay up? You're like, no, but no, but I'm not gonna say it again. That type of thing. But I also say the foundation their parents have laid have made it a lot easier. I'm not getting them as spoiled brats trying to work through that whole spoiled brat time frame, and I got to be the one to break them out of that mold. I'm getting them coming from a well disciplined home, discipline, not abuse, disciplined home that makes it so much more easy and convenient for me to nurture in a way. And so I'm looking forward to it. Going to do some emergency, if you know what I mean. The packets probably do like one Thursday, one Friday, one Saturday. Probably do every matter of fact, I'll do one every single day this weekend, just to make sure I'm boosted because I always say children are petri dishes, full of germs, and it just depends which ones get through your immune system. Um, but I'm looking forward to spending time with them. I have not figured out yet what the plan is going to be because you got to have a plan with them. It can't just be fries and a ton of ketchup, although they eat tons of ketchup. But looking forward to have a great weekend with them. Uncle Dave, back on the scene. But that's what's in my head. So, how do you tell when the universe is sending you signs? There's an article on Oprah.com entitled How to Tell When the Universe is Sending You Signs, and it's a profound question. But I also think the title of an article authored by Martha Beck, a sociologist, life coach, speaker, and the author of several best selling books on Oprah.com, of course, because Oprah got the book club, from September of 2016 issue of the Oprah magazine. She tells the story of packing for a book tour and thinking about being born in the year of the tiger, and then boom, a friend phones her, greets her with, "Hey, tiger." That friend had never called her before. Or there's stories of twins that are raised apart, but they often live bizarrely, quote, bizarrely similar lives. In one study, twin brothers were born named James by their adopted families. They both married women named Linda. Their second wife named Betty, same names. One son named James Allen, the other named James Allen. Now, it may sound like I'm saying the same thing, but it's two different spellings of Allen, believe it or not, but they named them the same thing. Both had dogs named Toy, smoked Salem cigarettes, and worked in law enforcement. And so is that the universe connecting with them too? Now, they say these kind of stories have me convinced that I should stay open to the possibilities of magic, but I don't want to just fling reason aside. This is what she says. When I have an amazingly unlikely experience, I pose three questions. Now, this may sound the same, but I'll differentiate what the difference is. It's actually one question, three ways. Why, I'm emphasizing why, is this happening to me? Why is this happening to me? And why is this happening to me? She says, I also know that people tend to read significance into unrelated events, especially if they're looking for evidence to support things they've already believed. This is called confirmation bias, and everyone is guilty of it, especially in times of fear or uncertainty. Now, psychiatrist Carl Jung had a term for meaningful coincidences called synchronicity. Ooh, I practiced that word. I tell you, I did. Synchronicity is what happens when seemingly unrelated events coincide in improbable ways that have some sort of significance, for you. Now, Jung believed synchronicities were evidence of a unifying consciousness at play in the universe, creating physical manifestations of what's happening in our psyche. Now, there's a term called panentheism. Panentheism. There we go. Panentheism. I'm butchering it. Excuse me. Panentheism. Panentheism. There we go. And it's a belief that God is present in the world and the world is present in God, and that the divine extends beyond space and time. The word panentheism comes from the Greek words pan means all, en means in, and theos meaning God. Now, thinking about synchronicity and panentheism, we got a lot of words this episode. You must wonder, whether you're religious or not, what connections exist in the universe and on what level they are connected. Are coincidences just remarkable occurrences, and I'm quoting here, remarkable occurrences of events or circumstances without apparent causal connection? That's how it's defined. Or is there more that we lack the ability as humans to perceive beyond momentary blips in our existence? Now, I'm a math and science guy, and so data and proof are my mindset. I need empirical evidence to support theories. And this is something difficult to repetitively prove, right? But the answer is out there. But as a math and science guy, I want A plus B equals C every single time. And so this is an interesting topic, and the first time I'm talking about it on this podcast, and I'm talking about this because I have a nice guest for this episode, Kirsten Rudberg. Now, a little bit about her. She is a panentheist, but also an author. Her books are recently acquired by George R. R. Martin's bookstore in Santa Fe, a screenwriter, producer, podcaster. Interesting topic here. She is a, quote, third culture kid, which I had never heard of before doing my research for this episode, having grown up overseas in Guyana, South America, as well as Lahore, Pakistan. She has an animated series on YouTube called Murder of Two, which I love the concept, by the way. It's about two crows who sit on a line and observe humanity. I would love to do that. I love to people watch. I talked about it in my last episode, so great topic. She has a podcast, Bite-Sized Blessings, where she interviews people about powerful moments in their lives, ones that's changed them forever. And lastly, she believes in adventure and joy in feeding her heart with belief in other people that eventually we will create the communities and spaces that will heal and include everyone. I love that. Welcome to Dave's Head, Kirsten. How is it going? How did I butcher those words nonstop? Just butcher them.
Well, no, I mean, first of all, I'm doing really well and I'm excited to be here. But I mean, panentheism is not an easy word to say, and it's not something you just use every day.
Yeah.
So, I mean, believe me, you're not the first person to say, how do you say this? How exactly is this said? So, yeah, synchronicity, panentheism, you did amazing. Yeah.
I appreciate it. And I will say, I kind of rolled the pan and the n together, panentheism, but you just pronounced or enunciated panentheism. So
Yeah.
I was getting it wrong the whole time, but I appreciate your
Okay.
support anyway. So yes, welcome to Dave's Head. As I gave a little introduction about you, as I always do with my guests, I love for them to introduce themselves. So if you could take a moment, tell the people who you are, what you do, and what you're about.
Yeah, sure. So I grew up overseas, as you already stated. That changed my entire life, but I didn't really understand that until later. Um, I really am open to, first of all, you have to know I love math and science. I have been a science nerd since I was about 13 when my dad subscribed to a science magazine for me. But I also have a master's of divinity and I went to seminary. So I went to a Methodist seminary, but I'm a panentheist, which means that I believe that everything's sacred, everything in this universe has consciousness of some sort, and that we're all co-creating together. I believe in other people, or at least I try to. You could call me naive or optimistic. I could be a little bit of both. But in the end, I'm essentially an artist. And I love bringing creations out into the world. But that being said, my podcast is really uplifting and gives people hope. Animated series is really deals with how ridiculous humans can be and how terrible humans can be. My first episode, they're all about 2 minutes long. My first episode was in response to George Floyd. I was just so beside myself and angry and upset. And my book series, Rewriting Peter Rabbit, it's very dark. It's very dark, and it deals with you know human trafficking, sweatshops, environmental degradation, all the stuff that we're doing in the world. A lot of social injustice. I'm trying to bring it to the forefront in a more kind of aggressive, confrontational way. So I kind of engage with the problems in the world through a creative lens.
Yeah, I will say I spent, well, two things. I spent probably the entire time you were talking saying the word in my head, panentheism, over and over and over again, just to make sure I at least got it right the rest of this episode. Um, but I will say, just from your intro there, I know you believe in the good in humanity, but a lot of your public projects deal with the dark side.
Yeah.
How's that contrast work? I mean, because I'm an optimist too, so I get it. But I'm also a realist, and I understand that there's not a plethora of positive people in this world. There's actually what I would say is a balance of good and bad in this world. So how do you balance those two?
That's a really great question. So, in my heart, I believe that each of us, every single human on the planet, is here to do a job. And, to lift someone up, lift others up, lift the environment up. We're all here as souls to create a better world for other people in whatever way that looks like. In one lifetime, for someone it could be just a single act in their life that they do that lifts someone else up. Other people it could be a lifetime of good works to lift other people up. And so, that being said, that we all come here with a mission or a service to provide a service. um, you know, I don't think you would argue with the fact that looking out at the world today and the various things that are happening, for good or ill, um, there's a lot of ill. And a lot of people aren't paying attention to that. And they are willfully and happily very ignorant. And unless I really believe that most people should be very angry about what's happening in the world, whether it is, you know, pets, animals, dogs and cats being overbred and euthanized in humane societies, or it's children who are not being fed because their parents can't find jobs that give them a working wage, or it's seniors that are being left alone by their family members because everybody has to work or they can't afford care, or whatever. Our social fabric is really falling apart. And so while I am an optimist and I want to remind people about the beauty in life, I'm also very angry at what's going on in the world. And so my creative projects are my way of getting and channeling that, I guess, discontent, you could call it, although that's a light word. My unhappiness, it's my way to call attention. Hey, look, people, pay attention. Why aren't you, I know, waking up? That's such a dirty word now, but why aren't you paying attention to what is happening in this world, to your neighbors, to your fellow human beings, to the animals that are around you, to the earth? Why aren't you paying attention? So that's how I marry those two kind of parts of myself, I shall say. So yeah.
No, I 100% get that, and a couple of things top popped in my head. One, I've had frogs at my front door for at nighttime for a while now, and I don't know what the explanation for that is, and the connection with the universe, but just a random thing that popped in my head when you spoke about animals, because I have these two seemingly bullfrogs. I'm no reptile expert, but they're bullfrogs to me, and they literally come sit at my front door, And when I open the door, they don't try to jump in. They don't try to run away. You kind of have to nudge them sometime because you don't want to slam the door on them. But this started this year, and I have no idea what the reason behind that is. But the second thing that popped in my head was, so I talk about in my opening for this episode about the brother Marcellus Williams, who's a death row inmate in Missouri, who actually, depending on the timing of this episode, may already be put to death for a crime that apparently there's a lot of skepticism about him actually committing. And speaking of, being incensed and trying to use positive light words like you did, but being incensed or angry about those types of injustices in the world is one of the things that I think we need to shine a light on. And I think that's what I'm getting from what you're doing. It's sometimes you need to characterize, whether it be animated or just verbally,
Yeah.
these negative things and misjustices and miscarriages and just violence and evil that's in the world in order to get people to see just how prevalent these things are. So I definitely appreciate that. I definitely appreciate that.
Yeah, yeah. I actually, something that really resonated with me lately is, I don't know if you're familiar with the very famous painting called The Scream. Have you seen that?
Is that the one where it's kind of like the ghost thing, ghosty
He's like,
looking?
has his mouth is open and he has his
Yeah.
hands on his face. So,
Yep.
I've always looked at that painting and seen, oh my gosh, this person's screaming. They're
Mm.
just screaming, and this is the energy that's coming out. But then someone else, I read something somewhere else that said, no, this is a painting of someone who's hearing the screams of the humanity of what's going on in the world, and they're trying to cover their ears because it is just so much and they can't take it all in. And that completely blew my mind. And I thought, what a beautiful and subtle way to make a comment on what was happening at the time in the world. And I just thought, oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to sit with this for a while, because this revelation is just so powerful, and I don't know what to do with it. Utterly fascinating. So yeah, and as far as the bullfrogs, so okay, let's get a little just tiny woo woo here, if you'll allow
Yeah.
me briefly.
Feel free.
So,
Feel free.
um, there are a lot of, on my podcast, I interview lots of different humans, for atheists, religious, a-religious, spiritual. It doesn't matter who you are, what you believe in. You just come on and you talk. And I for my 200th episode, which just came out, I interviewed Louis Melmadrona, and he's a really prolific Indigenous Hispanic, Stanford graduated MD, who also has been taught Native American healing his whole life. I think he's about 75 now or so. So he does both of those things when he heals his patients. And in a lot of indigenous cosmologies, animals are there to communicate something to you, to wake you up to something that you need to recognize or that you need to understand, to call attention to something. And so I would encourage you to go online and type in meaning of bullfrog, and or even meaning of frog, because frogs have different meanings. The different kinds of frogs have different kinds of meanings. And even that action of going in and typing in meaning of bullfrog, meaning of frog, I know you have a math and science bent, which I so love and I appreciate, but that means that you're starting a journey towards maybe opening your mind. I don't know anything about you. Maybe you're already there, but opening your mind to co-creating with the universe or having a different kind of conversation. Does that make any
Mhm.
sense?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not telling you to do it. Do it or don't do it,
Mhm.
whatever floats your boat, but potentially think about it.
Yeah, and I've said on my podcast many times, I'm spiritual, not religious, so I do believe in connecting universally. This this universe cannot be just Earth, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot more out there, way more than even the smartest people on this planet understand. So
Oh
I'm
yeah, and
very
you know
open
what?
to a lot of things.
I do think, you were speaking earlier when you were introducing me about, these phenomena that are,
Mhm.
can't be measured and weighed and, categorized and what have you. But I think a lot of these quote unquote supra-normal experiences that people have are personal, right? They are like of that moment, of that time. They're personal. And how can you ever categorize or measure or weigh that? And I can give you
Mm.
a really good example of something that happened to me. It's a really quick story if you want. That was
Sure.
really strange. Okay. So one day I was sitting on my couch. It was about 10 a.m. I always go for a walk at 1 in the afternoon. And I was sitting on the couch being a slob, okay? Just going to admit it. Just a slob. And this voice, this prompt inside of me said, "Go, why don't you go on a walk now?" And, I just heard it as this like interior nudging, "Go on a walk now." And I said, "You know what?" I was like, "I don't go on a walk now. So no." And then a few minutes later, I was like, "No, really, go on a walk now." I still was resisting. I'm like, "No, no, 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 no," because I'm very stubborn and kind of a stinker. And then after the third time, it said, "Go on the walk." So, I don't like being nagged to death. It drives me crazy. So, grumbling and really frustrated and being just a brat, I put my shoes on and I went out the front door. I'm very frustrated at this point and annoyed, but I know whatever it is won't leave me alone until I actually do it. So, I go on a walk. It prompts me to go all these directions. I walk through this wooded area and then it said, "All right, now go back to the street." It was just like, "Go back to the street." And I thought, "Okay, this is stupid. You're sending me back home and nothing's happened. This is the stupidest thing I've ever experienced." Whatever. So I start walking along the street back towards my house and I see this car drive past me, pull over to the side of the road. This woman gets out. She looks confused. It's clear she's lost. I think to myself, well, that woman's lost. I wonder where she's going. I kind of catch up with her, but she's already back in her car. She goes like a half a block up, parks again, gets out, starts looking all around. And at that moment, I thought to myself, "Oh my gosh." Um, I had just remembered that a woman was supposed to come and pick up a free table that I put on Craigslist. And she was supposed to be driving a Nissan Sentra. And I looked at the woman's car who was up ahead. She was still, and it was a Nissan Sentra. And I thought, "Oh my gosh." So I trotted on up to her and I said, "By any chance, are you here to pick up a free table?" And she said, "Yes." And I'm so lost. I forgot to bring the address. I looked at the house from Google Space, which I'm not even sure who does that. And she said, "I could not, every house looks the same here." And I said, "Oh my gosh, I'm the person you're supposed to pick up the table from." And I said, I'm way down. I'm like a block and a half away down at the end of the street. She would have never found me, except that this interior prompt came in and said, "You have to go and be out there." We connected and I gave her the table. And I have no explanation for what that was. None, except that in my mind, the reason it happened, those three questions you were talking about earlier, that whole episode convinced me that there's more going on in this universe, in this reality, than we have words or explanations for. And I have to be okay with that mystery. I have to be okay with it. But it also opened up the option of kind of working with it with the knowledge that it's out there. And I needed that lesson.
Yeah, it's like the story of, you're supposed to leave at 3:30, but you stick around and watch TV for an extra minute, and the car crash shuts down the road you're supposed to drive on 2 minutes later. You would have been, in theory, in that vicinity when a car crash happens. How do you explain that? I don't need to stay for an
Absolutely.
extra minute to watch this show, but I did. You know,
Yes. As
it,
long
it's
as,
it's one of those things that you want to try to answer, you want to try to rationalize, you can't find enough. Again, coming back to math and science, empirical evidence to say this caused this caused this, but the coincidence is so mind blowing that you can't dismiss it either.
right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes. And I think that makes it, that for me, makes it exciting to wake up every day,
Hmm.
get out of bed, because you never know what kind of magical or maybe fabulous thing's going to happen. There's so much
Hmm.
opportunity out there. And I think
Yeah.
that's what's exciting.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I want to take a step back to this term that I never heard before we were introduced to each other, called third culture kid.
Yeah.
Um, Define that term for the audience and then talk about your upbringing as a third culture kid and what impact that had on how you experience and how that experience has shaped your life.
Oh yeah. Okay. So third culture kid. So you have to know I didn't know that I was one until I started seminary, and they wanted um, us to kind of, well, first quarter, I guess you should say, first third of the year of seminary, we had a class um, that really deconstructed and broke us down around the legacy of slavery, of racism in this country. And I mean, it was intense. People were crying during the class. There was a psychotherapist who was there while the professor was teaching. It was just intense and brutal and so needed. And um, while I was taking that class, I reflected on growing up overseas because, as you said, I grew up in Guyana and Pakistan. I was surrounded by kids from all over the world, every religion, every culture, every skin color, everything you could ever imagine. And so, my idea of the world, you went to school, you learned, you played, you had fun, you played soccer, everything, we just had fun. We liked each other. And then I came back to the States and I was plopped in the middle of Illinois where everyone was white. And, as I was going through seminary, I realized my first great heartbreak as a kid was being taken from that really accepting and inclusive world to the middle of Illinois. Now, it did not help that my mother sent us to school on the first day in Pakistani clothing. It was like kiss of death for me. But everybody, all of a sudden, like what you wore was important. Jordache and Izod at that time. What you brought in your lunchbox. I'm dating myself, by the way, by revealing that.
I
Um,
was waiting to jump in, but go ahead. I'll jump on you later about that.
I mean, honestly, it just, I was the oldest in the family. It broke my heart. And I was so confused and disturbed by this shift. It was just so upsetting for me psychologically that I had to do fourth grade again because I could not process what had just happened in my life. Um, Now, the moment that I understood that childhood was an insane gift to me was when I was in this class in seminary. And a woman who was about 10 to 15 years older than me, maybe about 60, she was telling this story about being a little girl in Texas and, bringing one of her classmates over to play. And she loved this girl and they were having the best time and had the best day. But when the little girl left, her dad said, "You were never having that child over again," and really let her have it. And she was sobbing, telling this story. How many, like 50 years later, 50 years later, she was sobbing. And that was the moment that I understood that my childhood was singular and an incredible gift. Um, as I'm sure you can have guessed, the little girl that the father didn't want back was African American. And it scarred this woman for life. And so, while the class did provide a safe container for her to reveal this and kind of work through it, I just thought, oh my goodness. I mean, I didn't have that experience. I got to play with everyone from everywhere, and we all had a good time, and we didn't care about anyone. And so I think that kind of experience and exposure to the world at a young age makes you understand that at heart we're all the same. We all want the same thing: belonging, community, love, food, shelter. We all in our hearts want the same thing, most of us. And, you know, what we wear doesn't matter, what we look like doesn't matter, what color our skin is or what religion we practice doesn't matter. We all just want to be in the sandbox hanging out with each other and having a good time and creating and building things that are beautiful. At least I'm projecting onto the entire world now. Now I'm projecting to everybody. But that is what it has done for me. Third culture kids are more open to the world. They have more curiosity. They're more generous as far as just um, like welcoming people in. They're kind of, they like to move a lot. They like to travel. They like to see the world. They're a little bit nomadic. Of course, these are broad terms. Not everybody's the same way. But in general, those are kind of who third culture kids are.
Yeah, I always say that love and hate are both taught, and so it's interesting that you got to experience both sides of the coin, which it's way more than just two sides of a coin in this world. But you got to experience the warmth, embrace, the community that everyone's equal, no one hates anyone, and then unfortunately we have in America, we have the U.S., we have pockets and people who we're taught to hate for different reasons, whether it's skin color, whether it's economic status, whether it's intellect and education. And I can see where that could be a very shocking experience to go from, something so warming and loving and humane to almost an inhumane experience to be judged every single day based on clothing and skin color and what school you went to and economic status. So I always wonder, because I think we're at a point in time in 2024 where it's just not taught in the home, it's taught on TV and the media. And I always wonder if all media went away one day. Just, there was a super um, EP burst that went through and all media shut down, all internet shut down. How would the world change if it took months or years to get that all back up? Because you'd have these people who judge by their experiences a lot more than being judged by someone else's experiences or someone else's teaching. Um, but yeah, that's an interesting childhood to speak about, or to have experience, I should say.
Oh, yeah. And I think, to your point about pockets of hatred and what have you, a lot of these people, and again, I'm speaking in generalizations here, a lot of these people
Hmm.
have never left their home, have never left their
Yeah,
city, have never left their
yeah,
state, have never gone out to experience the quote unquote other. They've
hmm,
never had the privilege of meeting other people where they're at and
hmm,
learning and understanding that they're just the same as them. And so, that's why I say my childhood was a gift because, I got it early on,
yeah,
intense immersion. But when you're a child, you're so open and malleable and you just
hmm,
you just want everybody to have fun. And, I try to carry that through into my adult life now. But yeah, it changed everything for me. And I so wish that more people, because I'm of the mind that hate is easy. Like if you want to talk about energies and using your energy and or your chi, if you want to call it that, hate is easy. It's the lazy person's default. Because you can just slide on in and be like, oh, I hate you. Love is hard. And love takes intimacy, vulnerability, knowing, understanding, patience. And, I don't want to be lazy. I generally love most people anyway, unless they really are not doing good works in the world. But love is hard. And so I understand why a lot of people just default to hate. But I also understand that most people or a lot of people weren't given the privilege that I was, which was to go out into the world and have these extraordinary experiences in which I got to understand that, you know, we all just want to have fun together or hang out together or whatever, and we're all the same. So I'm really lucky.
yeah. Or for me, just eat tacos and find beaches.
Tacos,
That's kind of all I want to do at this point. But
yum.
no, I think at this point I'm projecting, because I kind of get on my guests sometimes when they date themselves, like you said, Jordache and Levi's, and there's a Tommy Davidson does a stand up. I think it was the Shaq All Star Comedy Special where he talks about Jordache jeans. Just people just YouTube, you'll find it. But I think I'm projecting at this point because I kind of jump on these things. Listen, I'm almost 50. I'm closer than 40 or closer to 50 than I am to 40 at this point. But these things kind of flash in my head when people bring up these things from my childhood in the 80s, 90s. Um, so yeah, it's all in fun, but you kind of wish at some point you didn't age so fast. You kind of blinked and it's like, wait, I'm 40, right? But
Yes, yes.
but to step back for a second, so I know they talk about, and I don't have the exact dates and numbers in my head, but you talked about children being malleable, and there's some statistics, some study out there where it's like the first 14 years or 13 years, whatever it is, that really is when a child forms their love hate paths and all the wiring happens in the brain. And so that's why I talk about it. Love is hate. Love is taught just as much as hate is. And I don't know how we change that because the media is not going anywhere. Parents have learned from their parents, have learned from their parents. So you're asking for an entire generation to be rewired and then also teach that rewiring to their children. Um, I would say we're more on a downslope in the U.S. than the upslope as far as community and loving. And so we've got a lot of hurdles to try to get through to try to break this seemingly spiral that we're in right now. And honestly, I don't have the answer. I don't know how we do it. I mean, they say it starts with one, right?
Yeah,
Each one teach one, but we have to find people who are willing to be taught, to embrace, and also to teach. And that's
yeah,
where the struggle is, I think, in this country right now. There's so many people reliant on the information sources that they love or prefer, the people and circles that they exist in, and just their own personal feelings, which may be rooted in love or hate. And you take those three areas, it's extremely hard to chop into one of those to produce a result where more people are loving each other. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of hate is born out of fear.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the media absolutely, they have made a currency of fear.
Mm-hmm.
And that I think is a travesty in itself because, you look at fear, for me, if I look at fear or think about fear, it's essentially empty and meaningless. It is a fleeting sensation. Yes, it can be a feedback loop, but it is empty. Like there's no weight
Mm-hmm.
to it. The other thing I want to talk about is just epigenetics and how trauma descends in ancestry. And so a lot of people, I think, their responses to others that they don't like or they don't understand, or even world events or what's happening in their community, they're very much based in what has been handed down genetically through their lineage. These trauma responses, these which are all legitimate, by the way. These are ancestral wounds that are, science. As a science person, I'm sure they're still trying to understand epigenetics and methylation and I mean, but the good news is, as individuals, these traumatic experiences that are encoded in our DNA through methylation can be changed and shifted. We can work with them. They are not static, they are not set in concrete. So, whatever kind of ways or views we have of looking at the world or responding to the world, there are ways to change it. For example, meditation. You know, there are lots of ways to kind of, I say downshift, like you drive through this world, your mind and your brain and your emotions, and a stick shift car that's always grinding the gears and maybe, not very efficient and not serving you. But there are techniques, that you can use to change the way you shift those gears, to change the way that you move in the world or that you respond to things that trigger you or to things that make you respond in a fear-based manner. Visualization, narrative storytelling, meditation. I mean, the list is long. The list is long, and by the way, it's different for different people. Not one thing is gonna work for everybody. And really, it's up to us to find the things that really resonate and like kind of shift those fear and trauma responses. Um, and by the way, that's not fun work. It's not easy work. It will involve, even therapy, right? Talk therapy, somatic therapy. If you want to be more of a player in this world, more invested in the world, and change the way you respond, there are lots of different options. The other thing I was going to say is I forget which politician or human being used this phrase, 1,000 points of light. And you were talking about, being one person, this country's, sliding into this kind of morass of just negativity and confirmation bias and anger and hatred. Well, yes, I witness all that too. But I'm like, we need more than 1,000 points of light. Each individual is a point of light. We need millions of points of light. And those points of light need to go out individually, create change, do things in their communities that lift other people up. This is the only way things are going to change. And by the way, go out and meet people. And I know that it's like, it shouldn't be our jobs. I know that. I know it shouldn't be our jobs. But go out into the world and meet the stranger with hope and optimism and an open heart. And that's easier said than done. I fail every day, partially because I'm grumpy, but I fail every day. I think that's what's going to carry us through. Honestly, I don't know if that answered any of your questions.
No, it absolutely does. I was actually doing a quick research because I was going to talk about. I think a little differently, right? So I think if you have fears, you should be like tossed into the 20-foot water of that fear to learn to deal with it. In the case of say hatred, racism,
Hmm.
find out if your fear is really legitimate or not.
Hmm.
And so I was going to talk about I have a slight fear. I don't know if you know the plants where there's a bunch of little seeds, but they look like little eyes. It's called trypophobia, and so that's what I was researching really quickly. But I'll embrace my fear for the editing of this and actually put a picture of it on the screen, which will drive me nuts. But I'll do it anyway.
Okay.
Um, But I literally physically start skin crawling when I see this.
Okay.
I literally start to skin crawl, and I don't know why, but it's the repetitive. I think the definition is it's a fear of repetitive patterns and clusters or small holes. And I don't know why or when I developed it. It's something that happened in the last 10 years, but I cannot even glance at these things without my body freaking out.
Okay.
But because, and I love the dog, by the way, and
It's,
um, because that's the belief I have, where you should be thrust into your fears to either work through them, get over them, or confirm it. I mean, you might just confirm it as well. At some point, I do want to put myself in a garden of these plants that look just horrible to me. And
mhm.
so the correlation is simply this: if you're racist, if you're racist in any capacity, put yourself in the community of the people you're racist against to learn from them, to get to know them, and hopefully that it will change, or you may lash out. Never know. Um, if you're fearful of, say, poor people, if you're fearful of inner cities, you're fearful for backwoods country, whatever that is, put yourself in that position to not necessarily get over your fear, because that may not take care of it, but to at least understand what your fear is really about. And I think, talking about millions of points of light, that's a good place to start. Just have conversations, town halls, those types of things, because there are people who don't have a problem talking about their biases, talking about their fears, talking about these things, but they talk about it amongst people in their circle who share those fears and biases. So there's never going to be an exploration of what's driving that fear, that bias, that racism, that anger, that hatred. Um, and so that's kind of what I think. Just dive into that fear. But I know there's not a lot of people who are willing to do that, and that's part of the problem, or at least just generally talk about it. Their fear, their beliefs is what it is, and there's no compromise, and that's kind of where we are in a lot of people today. So, but that's my thought.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really interesting about the fear of patterns. That's really fascinating. What I would encourage, just a suggestion that just I thought of was it would be so interesting. Just, look, I love science, right? So I love
Hmm.
experiments, which I'm not trying to be.
Yes, experiment on me. Let's do it.
I mean, I think it would be really fascinating. Have you ever tried hypnosis?
I
To
have
like,
not.
okay, to try to just maybe go back to find the inciting incident for where this kind of began, it might be
Mm-hmm.
an interesting way to approach it in a way that's non-threatening, that might be a safer space for you
Mm-hmm.
versus sitting in a field of plants with eyes, because that sounds
Yeah.
horrifying to me too. Um,
it probably will make it so much worse. But
um,
that's yeah.
um, and the other thing I want to say is that you know, I love the town hall idea, bringing people
Mm,
together, but people have to be ready for it, right? They have to
yeah.
be ready and they have to actually show up to the town hall. And, look, I think about how human beings are and what is their default. And I try not to think about this very often because it gets me down. But the default is for us to, you know, for thousands of years, you form your little tribe, whether it includes 5 people or 100. You form your little tribe, and within the tribe, you because you've created this tribe, you're automatically going to be othering other people because they're not part of your tribe. And so there's something very, very deep inside human beings about finding belonging and then creating a tribe or a religion where some people belong and other people don't. And that's what we need to break apart and break down, is that tribalism. Because yes, it is a wonderful and incredible feeling, like that, to belong to something, to feel like you've been accepted and brought into the fold. It is amazing. But if you have to do it at the expense of excluding others, then already it's gone wrong.
Hmm.
Um,
No, I agree with that.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, I'm using all these words and I'm saying all these things, and it's all so much easier to say than to do and practice in the world. I'm talking about an ideal world, one that,
Mm,
I wish existed,
yeah.
one that I could imagine that could be. But humans, like, we just have these predispositions and these ways of being that are probably very much based on survival from thousands of years ago, that
Hmm.
are based in a biological imperative for survival again. And how do we start working with that and breaking it apart. It's
Mm,
big work and it's almost impossible work, but I hope that we can do it.
yeah. I will say I love this conversation. I think because a lot of the words we're using, I don't know if you remember the Shaq when they make fun of him. He has the bouncing ball to kind of go through the words that he's saying. And I don't know if you remember. I'm gonna date myself here. Pop up video. I think it was on VH1. We're gonna have to do pop ups with definitions. We're gonna have to do post editing with this episode. But no, I love this conversation though. But I will say I had about 8 questions that I predefined I was going to ask. We've gotten through one of them because this conversation is so back and forth. So I 100% love that. Um, but I do want to bring these next two up. So there's a statement that you have, and I'll quote it: that spirit or energy or godness exists in all I can see and not see, and that magic and miracles are real and potent. I think it's powerful. It's so many layers to it, and I suspect that it's rooted in the panentheism. And so I want you to talk about. Now you talked about a little bit, but talk about the journey. Where was the genesis of that? How did you decide this is the direction I'm going to go based on that quote?
Yeah, well, ever since I was a kid, when I was a child, I distinctly remember just feeling and working outside when we came back to the States that, the moss and the tree that I was playing under, the bushes where I'd find a safe little cave, that it was all like nurturing me and holding me. I had this profound connection. And then my parents' divorce happened and things got totally crazy, and I had to put all that stuff away. And then when I moved out to Portland, I started having some strange experiences that I couldn't explain that were kind of bizarre. But then have continued to have experiences that are some would call supernormal. And so basically, I mean, listen, all of these, whatever telekinesis, psychic stuff, I just think it's science that we haven't learned to explain yet. We're we're sort of maybe understanding a little bit more about quantum physics, consciousness, the quantum realm. Um, and so scientists are, in the quote unquote real world are getting closer to maybe understanding. So I think someday all of this phenomena that people think are woo woo is actually going to be scientifically explained at some point. Um, but I went to seminary. I went to seminary as undefined, so not a religion. Everybody else there was either evangelical, Mormon, Lutheran, Presbyterian. I mean, every kind of, it's a very inclusive and spacious seminary. So every other person came. And two of my cohort were panentheists. And I thought, oh my goodness, what is that? So I started looking it up and I thought, oh my gosh, I believe that. And what I believe is that everything around me, it's a very indigenous worldview. Everything around me is conscious, that it's co creating. It might speak slower because it's a rock and it's been here for millions of years, but it's all here wanting to co create with me, wanting me to understand that I am part of an intelligent universe and that, the things that we call magic or miracles are just part and parcel of being invested in what's going on. And once you understand, that's why I encourage you to talk to the bullfrogs. In indigenous spirituality, when an animal shows up in your life, it's giving you a message. It is trying to communicate something to you that you need to work on or understand or comprehend. Um, and for me also, my playful childlike side, it's more fun to understand or think that I'm in an intelligent universe and that, that tree wants to talk to me. Oh, and by the way, the experiments that they've done with plants, don't get me started, that they understand what we're saying and they react. They comprehend. They've done experiments that plants react to the words that we use. Um, I mean, the science and the literature is absolutely fascinating, and it all leads me to a place where I am co creating and I get to be a part of this creation, which is beautiful and at its heart, compassionate and understanding and filled with love. So, yeah.
No, I'm sitting here holding your thoughts until you finish your thought. My TO, my girlfriend, who I call TO for those who follow me on this podcast, she literally talks to and names the plants, and she is a world class green thumb compared to me. She's also named our frog Freddie, I believe, is the name, and she'll get on me if I got the name wrong because I suck at names, but I think she named the bullfrog Freddie.
Oh,
Um, but yeah, she has conversations. She tells me I need to do that with my plants all the time, and one of my plants, snake plant, is kind of struggling, lost a leaf. So she's like, "I'm telling you, you need to talk to him." So she'll get a kick out of this whole segment. But I so I don't do that. I don't really talk to I do talk to myself a lot. It's one of the things I do. I talk out loud to myself. It's kind of my when I work through problems or I'm thinking through something. But I don't talk to plants so much. I did talk, I had cats, I had dogs. I do have real conversations as if they're humans, which I don't understand. But if you have a pet, I'm sure you do the same thing. We have conversations with our pets as if they can answer us in the ways that we understand, and
Oh
that
yeah.
they understand the things that we're saying. Um, but I never thought really about doing. I'm pointing behind my camera because there's an array of plants behind this camera. Only one of which are mine, by the way. Um, so yeah, I'm just getting on my TL right now. But so I do want to bounce something on the other side. You talked about seminary, and so doing research for this episode and the conversation we were going to have, I came across an article on fortruthministry.org, and they talk about panentheism. And this is a quote from there. Panentheism is hostile to and opposed to biblical creation and the gospel of Jesus Christ, no matter how spiritual it appears and how much they talk about Jesus. Those are very harsh words about people who believe what they don't believe. And so I just wanted to get your thoughts and reaction to that. Not because I'm trying to attack panentheism, but I came across that, and it was such a strong rebellion of something I hadn't heard before. But I was trying to figure out why, other than the religious
Mhm.
ecosystem, why there would be such a strong pushback against this or any um, secular belief.
Well, look, like I do think a lot of religions, and specifically this quotation, it's all about power and control and money.
Mm.
And so, God forbid that,
No pun intended.
yeah, no pun intended, that a human being can access the spiritual, can access the sacred on their
Mhm.
own. I mean, the people running these ministries and running these religions, they benefit at the top by controlling the message. And the message is God isn't anywhere out there. What you're looking at is just God is, you get to God through me. I'm the channel. So I sound so cynical, but believe me, I've witnessed a lot of this. And I also think, I mean, I shouldn't generalize that a lot of religions are about power and money, but we see it over and over again. It's about control, controlling the message, controlling the people. Um, I mean, it is very threatening to anyone in charge of a religious institution to think that that power and control can be taken away by people having a direct experience of the divine or a direct revelation through nature. Um, and it's also so interesting because you go back to Genesis where God created, I gave a sermon on this once. Where God created the world and all the good things in it, the animals, the plants. It was beautiful. It was gorgeous. It was amazing. And God did it through breath and word. And word, if you think about breath and word doesn't happen unless there's air coming out of your vocal cords, but also vibration. And, what do we think about quantum physics? Quantum physics is vibration. And so essentially in that story, I mean, this is how I understand it. God created this reality that we're seeing and we're witnessing and we're participating in through the word, through air and vibration. And you could call that quantum physics at this point. But that to me means that every single thing that you see is an emanation of that original quantum state that has arisen into being, whether it was through evolution or whether it happened 10,000 years ago in the Bible. It all has arisen through this quantum process and come into being. And so, why wouldn't we access that sacred energy, that beautiful energy of love or compassion, understanding through the plants that we talk to? Why? I mean, wouldn't it be a more beautiful world to understand that the tree outside has emanated from God's original speaking and that we get to experience God's original voice by witnessing that tree and understanding that it's sacred and that maybe it has something to tell us? What I also think is interesting about that passage is that it utterly removes the legitimacy and voice of anything that's natural. And it kind of says, it's our way or the highway. And those things, they're not sacred. So we can cut them down. We can just go in and pollute a river, because they're not sacred, they're not of God, and they're not part and parcel of what we understand of God. And so that's problematic for me and it makes me angry. Hence my animated series and hence the books. And I'd rather be in a world that is sentient and co-creating, where everything is part of God's message, where everything is however you want to define that God, where everything is just waiting for me to converse with it, than that sterile lockdown passage that you read to me. But that's my preference.
No, I just wanted to get your opinion. It was something that just my random research just came across and started reading these articles. I wanted to understand panentheism.
Mhm.
I'm starting to get better at it. Panentheism more and more for this episode, and I came across this and like, whoa, that's probably the strongest thing I've seen for or against panentheism. So I was just very curious. I'm not a my way or the highway, this or
Yeah,
that type of person. So I respect the people I know who are highly, highly religious, and I respect the people I know atheists, and I know
absolutely.
people in between.
Yeah.
And your journey, your path is your journey, your path.
Yes.
So it struck me in a way where obviously I don't agree with it, but I wanted to get the reaction to it. And kind of in correlating this a little bit, you talk about bravery. And so I'm curious, your story of bravery, what that experience was and what you learned from it.
Well, honestly, I mean, I don't think we know we're brave until we're put in a situation where we have no
Mm,
choice.
absolutely.
And it's either like sink or swim.
Hmm.
And, you can doggy paddle for a while and maybe avoid it. Avoid it for a
Hmm.
little while, but eventually you're going to have to go on through if you want to emerge on the other side. I think bravery shows up in our lives in different ways. What's brave for one person is not brave for another person. And oftentimes you can be brave without even understanding until it's over. And you're like,
Hmm.
oh my gosh, what did I just do? Was I bonkers? So, about, gosh, um, it's kind of a funny and crazy story. So you have to know I'm not a hiker. At the time that this happened, I was not religious. I was living my life in Portland, had a house, animals, job, the whole thing. Have always been inquisitive about science, religion, myth, folk tale, how humans create meaning, everything in the world. So I've always had an inquisitive mind. And so I was dating a Catholic at the time who was very liberal, and we were going to a Catholic church, which I loved. It was beautiful. And one day we went to a feast day at a monastery outside of Portland. It was beautiful. It was for Our Lady of Guadalupe. It was honoring her, Mother Mary, basically. And I was into it. And there were tacos. Did I mention there were tacos? So
Amazing.
there you go. So my best friend, my dear beloved best friend, who I love more than anything, had died the year before of a really rare form of Parkinson's disease, where she was diagnosed and died within 5 years. And she and I can't even explain how much we loved each other. It was beyond words. And at the event, I found myself sitting next to a woman who was the spitting image of my friend Linda, who had died. And it was eerie. And I thought, I don't even know what's happening, from the jewelry and the hair and everything. And afterwards, we started talking, and I learned that she was a Presbyterian pastor. And in the conversation, she said, oh, well, I'm going to start walking the Camino in February. I think it's time. And I thought, what? What's the Camino? I don't even know what that is. And my partner at the time said, oh, it's these ancient pilgrimage routes in Europe that have existed, since the time of Christ. Basically, people walk from wherever they lived to Santiago in Spain, the church there. It's called the Way of St. James, and it was a way to testify to your devotion to St. James, the church, Catholicism, all that. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. I've never heard of it. Cool. But a few months later, he got me these pamphlets on the Camino. And I said, oh, that's interesting. I love to learn. And so I was reading them. I got kind of an idea of what it was like. And I thought, oh, fun. That's interesting. Like, I'm not religious. I'm not Catholic. I don't hike, whatever. Thank you. I love learning things. So thank you. And so then, like a month later, a friend called me, she lived in Colorado, and she said, I just saw the most amazing movie. I have to tell you, I had to send it to you. I don't know why. It's on DVD. Again, dating myself. She mailed me this thing. I open it, and it's this movie called The Way. Martin Sheen, Emilio Estevez, and it's about 5 people who walk the Camino. And she didn't know anything that I'd had this Camino conversation. And I thought, she just said, I think it's a great movie. You should watch it. For some reason, I think you should watch it. So I watch it. I'm like, interesting. Okay. Now I know what it actually looks like, what the process is like, the revelations that can happen. Okay, cool. And then about 4 months later, I was sitting at my acupuncturist table, and he just started saying, "Oh, yeah, my mom just had to quit the Camino because she broke her ankle. She walked 300 miles. It's kind of a bummer for her." And I was like, what? Okay, am I the only person in the world who doesn't know what this thing is? And here's another person talking about it. Okay, I'm sorry for your mom, but that's really odd that you're bringing this up. And then about 5 months later, another best friend was cleaning out her mother's study in Kansas. And her mother had lived in this house and was a pack rat, and she was going through every item of paper. And her mom had been moved into an Alzheimer's care unit. And she called me one day and said, Kirsten, I don't know why this is happening, but I found this pamphlet in my mom's study, which is taking weeks to go through. And I am compelled to mail it to you. I don't know why, but I'm putting it in the mail. So you don't think I'm bonkers. I'm giving you a heads up, but you're getting something in the mail. And so a few days later, I open the mail. There it is. I open the envelope, and it is a walking guide for the Camino from the 1960s. And I thought to myself, what is happening? What is happening? So whenever I'm, confused, I go to my tarot deck and I pull a card. And I pulled a card, and it said, "You have not been listening to the messages we've been sending you." And I sat on my bed and looked up at the sky because the whole thing was so ridiculous. And I said, "You've got to be kidding me. You want me to walk the Camino? What? I am not religious. I have a full-time job. If I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it for months. So I'm going to have to like quit the life that I, know, leave my house, my animals. Like, what is, no, this is stupid." I told my partner, and he was like, "Well, that's weird." Yeah, but he wasn't really, he's like, yeah, he doesn't believe in that stuff. So I wrestled with it for a couple weeks, and I thought, okay, the signs are all there. It's an invitation. It just felt like an invitation. I could say yes or I could say no, but the way that it had come about was so bizarre and so strange. And by the way, I'm not religious. I knew that it was an invitation that would change my life. So then I start telling people I'm going to do it. My family think I'm insane because A, I'm going to leave my life, quit my job and everything, and do this for months. I choose a route that's arduous and full of solitude because I'm like, if I'm going to do this, I'm not doing the party route. I'm going to do the route that actually clarifies me and is hard. And so, the second I decided to do it, every single obstacle blew out of the way. A friend said, "Oh, I can house it for you for 3 months for free. I need a place to live anyway. So I'll take care of your animals. I'll take care of everything." And then I found a place to like store my car in Florida for free. So what I basically did was drive across the US. I stopped in Santa Fe. I stopped in New Orleans. And then I got on a ship because this trip was so big for me that I couldn't even process it. I took an 11-day cruise from Miami to Barcelona, 3 trains to southern France, and I walked from southern France to northern France and then started walking along the Spanish coast. Now, I was terrified. I had no idea why I was doing this, but at the same time, because I had this inner knowing of peace and certainty and just understanding that this was a trip I had always done. So I don't believe that time exists. I believe that we're all experiencing, everything happens all at once, but our consciousness somehow funnels it into a linear experience. Um, that I had always done this, um, walk, this hike, and that I would always do it because I would always accept the invitation. And so there was a sense of, I'm going to be safe because I know I've already done this. And I, by the way, now have faith in this God or this universe. They would never ask me to do something that was dangerous. Now, France had the worst weather it had ever had in like 90 years. So it hailed and snowed on me in May. I was alone most days through the most remote countryside. When I got to the tourist office in southern France, the woman said, "This is not a good idea. You don't speak French. Like, it's treacherous. The landscape is really arduous. It's really dangerous. You shouldn't be doing this as a single woman." But my God, I have never been treated with more love and reverence and kindness by complete strangers in my entire life in these small villages. The whole thing was like a dream. Yes, there were days that I was covered in mud. I fell so many times. I fell over barbed wire. I met incredible people, but at every step of the way, there was someone who took care of me. And I felt safe and I felt observed and witnessed. And the whole experience was terrifying because when I was in the middle of the ocean on the ship on the way over, one night I woke up having an anxiety attack and I thought, what am I doing? Kirsten, you're not religious. What are you doing? This is bonkers. And then I had to go back to, no, remember the signs. You were asked to do this. And so this is a part of your story and one that you show up for, and it's going to change everything. And so, yeah, I mean, I was brave by hook or by crook, sometimes not even knowing that I was brave or that I would have to be brave that day. And it did. It changed my entire life.
Wow. I wasn't expecting that story at all. I mean, that's incredibly inspirational. I have so many follow-up questions, but I know we're maxed out on time or we're coming up on it anyway. But yeah, that's an inspirational story. I mean, I'm still processing this. I mean, from the signs to the actual get up and go, to things falling into place. Like, hey, I could watch a place for 3 months. I mean,
Yeah.
just the timing of that. There's so much connectivity in that story.
Yes.
Which is insane.
Well, and it
Hmm.
was part of my process of understanding the synchronicity and
Hmm.
understanding that I could co-create. Do you know what I'm saying? So
Yeah,
it was a longer term lesson for me to understand that the world and this universe is conscious, if that makes any sense.
absolutely does. Yep.
Yeah.
So that's all for the Q&A segment of my podcast, and now I want to move to my favorite segment of my podcast with my guests called First Thoughts. But now, First Thoughts is sponsored by SRE Solutions. SRE Solutions provides complete, robust, precise, and reusable real-world solutions, satisfying and resolving your business needs. For more information, visit rebrand.ly/DHPSRE. So, for those watching or listening for the first time, as I used to always say, I'm going to try to get back to that. Shame on you, but I'm happy you're here. The way First Thoughts works is I offer a word or phrase to my guests to get their first thought. Now, they aren't privy to these first thoughts because obviously that would just ruin the first thought narrative. So, Kirsten, are you ready for some first thoughts?
Yes.
All right. So, first thought, I like to come out the gate with a softball one: creativity. What's your first thought?
Oh my goodness. It's play. And whether it's adults or children, it is just, I picture it as a river that you can just jump into. It's a gentle river. It's not like a waterfall or anything. And you just get to splash around and play and let loose. And it's the most exciting place to be because Joker's wild. You can do anything. So, yeah.
Okay. We kind of touched on this second one a little bit, but I'll see if it's a different first thought. So create, or not creativity, compassion. What's your first thought?
Oh, needed. We need more of it. And by the way, it's not easy because
Mm,
we all have those days where someone flips us off while we're driving when we make an innocent mistake. Or, but I think compassion is born out of being centered and grounded in your own life and understanding that people make mistakes, and also having an open heart. And in this world and in this reality, it is challenging and difficult to have an open heart, honestly, every day,
mm.
because you can get hurt, you can get rebuffed, you can get rejected, but it's all about the heart and being open to the world and understanding at its heart this world is a good place and so is everyone in it, and we all have bad days.
Gotcha. And I'll say, just for the record, in case anybody's watching that might care, I do not practice or react to road rage in any way, shape, or form. Just to put it out there. It's not true, by the way.
Good.
Um, might have a touch of road rage sometimes.
Yes.
All right. So, last first thought, and it's a phrase. I believe I took this from either your profile or some conglomeration of it. Hope in a fractured world. What's your first thought?
Oh my God. That's how the light gets in.
Mm,
I mean, a fractured world, and that's such a trope. I did not use this initial phrase. It's not my idea. But when things are broken, um, there's this phrase that says that's where the light gets in. And
mm,
so the world is fractured, which offers a lot of opportunity. that offers so much opportunity for good works and showing up for other people and being present and being of service. Now, that's not me saying I'm happy or glad that the world is fractured. I'm happy or glad that the world is broken, that other people are broken, but it allows us, or it gives us a space to then be of service and
Mm.
show up for others and bring goodness and hope to others.
Okay. No, I love the analogy that when things are fractured, that's how light gets in. I know we would like to, crazy glue it back together or just throw it out and buy something new.
Yeah.
But in that analogy, you're actually allowing the outside or the brokenness to be something that actually causes the healing of itself. So I do
Yeah.
love that. All right. So this season, I'm turning over the power of first thoughts to my guests in a segment I call TO First Thoughts. The way this works is, Kirsten, you have an opportunity to throw a first thought back at me. So if you had a first thought for me, what would it be?
Oh gosh. Okay. I'm a nerd. Okay. You have to know this. A little bit of a
Okay.
sci-fi nerd. So I want to know what your favorite, I don't know if you like science fiction, but
Hmm.
what's your favorite sci-fi book or show?
So book, I'll tell you, I go way back to my childhood. I love talking about these books. It got me into sci-fi, the choose your own adventure books.
Oh,
If you
yes.
remember those,
Yes.
I've never seen anybody excited about that before, but I used to love those books. I mean, you can sit there every single day and read the book because you're choosing your own adventure. You're flipping to page 22 if you want to go to the right, and 27 if you want to go to the left. And for a while, I couldn't understand how someone could write and create books that way
Mhm.
until I understood you just write and create a book that way.
Yeah.
But um, I always adored those books. They were just my favorite books. Favorite show would have to be a tie between Star Trek: The Next Generation. It's just that series, one of the best series ever,
Yes. Yes. Yes.
and Quantum Leap. Quantum Leap with
Yes.
Scott Bakula. I used to love
Yes.
that show.
I am
Yeah.
actually, I am a fan, and I'm okay. Firefly. Did you ever watch that? Joss Whedon with Nathan Fillion. It's like
I
sort
don't
of
think so.
short cowboys in space. I'm a brown coat, which is, and it
Okay.
like is a cult classic. It's an older show now, but it became such a cult phenomenon that I even attended like a brown coat revolution in Portland, Oregon when I
Hmm.
lived there. And it was
Okay.
amazing. It was like a weekend convention of brown coats. So I would
Hmm.
have to say Firefly, but love Star Trek Next Gen. Oh my God.
Hmm.
Love it. Anything science fiction, love it. My favorite science fiction trilogy right now is by Xixin Liu, The Three Body Problem. And it is
Hmm.
unbelievable. The show, they made it into a show on Netflix, which isn't great, I understand, but it is, if you are a science nerd, it is sublime. It is
Hmm.
absolutely fabulous. So yeah, I don't know, you
I'll have
didn't
to check
ask
it out.
me, but I told you my answers.
No, I appreciate that. I would say more modern times, to make myself sound younger right now, but more modern times, I would say the Avengers series is probably
Yes.
because there's so much science fiction in there and so much
Yes.
science in there. And I'm a big Iron Man fan, of course, because he's the most
Of
between
course.
him and Hulk, but he's the most science and sciencey type of guy. But yeah, choose your own adventure. Quantum Leap. I used to sit up there because for some reason they would put this on at 1 o'clock in the morning when I was younger, and so I'm sitting there at 1 o'clock in the morning watching all the episodes. And plus, if you remember, Quantum Leap touched on so many cultural topics and
Yeah.
events throughout his life, but really throughout our history in the U.S. And so, um, just some of the topics they would cover, things I never heard of as a kid, but I'm like, wow, this happened or that happened, and then to understand how science had been really predating me for so long. There was the one with the fascist plane. I remember he leaped in the pilot of that one.
Yeah.
Um, there was a black guy who was accused of murdering his wife. I want to say not owner is probably a really bad way to put it, but I'll say employer. I'll say that.
Okay. Okay.
Um, but yeah, so many different episodes, and then of course, if you're a big Quantum Leap fan, you remember the Agatha episodes, and it wasn't just one episode; there were multiple episodes with the creepy Agatha stuff.
Yes.
Probably the most creepy episodes they had the entire series. And those come on at 1 o'clock in the morning. So imagine a kid my age watching that crap at 1 o'clock in the morning. But yeah, love Quantum Leap, Star Trek: The Next Generation, Data, and Worf and how that series progressed from, if you go look at the early episodes, the horrible makeup. I mean, for that time, for if we
Yes.
look now, it's horrible makeup to them
Yeah.
graduating to the movies and just everything advancing.
Yeah.
So love that series.
Yes. Love Scott Bakula.
Hmm.
Extremely.
I probably don't love him as much as you do, but
Okay.
yes.
Okay. Fair. 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 Fair.
Yeah. Yeah. But Kirsten, I do want to thank you for stepping to Dave's head, as I always do with my guests. If there's anything you want to talk about or promote before I let you go, feel free to do so now.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I love always promoting my podcast, Bite-Sized Blessings, and it's BYTE because it's an homage to my love of science. Every episode has either the long form interview or the little bite-sized option of this person telling their story of their miracle or their magic. And I like to promote it because so many people have told me it makes them happy or reminds them that the world is a good place, and we need more of that in this world. We need more creators bringing goodness and beauty in the world. And so I urge everyone to give it a chance and listen.
Gotcha. Thanks. And I definitely will check it out. And then also you have books. You want to talk about that real
Yes.
quick?
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm rewriting the Peter Rabbit book series. You can buy them at Beastly Books, which is George R. Martin's bookstore. I have the first 3 done. I hire illustrators. This series is it's darker than the original Peter Rabbit series, but that's because I told you that I'm done messing around and I want people to really understand. Like the first one, A Tale of Two Rabbits, is a rewrite of Peter Rabbit, deals with how we're destroying the environment. And it's about the woods and Peter watching the woods get ripped away by the farmer, McGregor. The second book is The Nuts Guts. It's a rewrite of Squirrel Nutkin. He's going to be the trickster in the series. It's a little lighter. And then the third one is Boom Chicka Meow Meow. And it's about a cat who runs a sweatshop, where the mice who have been chased out of the woods because of the woods getting torn down, they're being used to make the clothes from the people in town. And it's anti-consumerist a little bit, like how the mouth never is satiated. The mouth is never filled and it just wants more and more and more. And how that's, done at the expense of bodies, animal bodies, human bodies, and that we need to change things. So yeah, it's they're a little more aggressive, let's say, but that's because, as I said, I'm done messing around. We need to understand what we're doing to other sentient beings, to the environment, and to this world. So yeah.
So what popped in my head real quick, and I know we're gonna end
Yeah,
this soon, but
yeah.
Ratatouille, one of my favorite cartoon movies.
Oh,
So when you said the mouse is they're in the sweatshop by the cat, I'm like, this reminds me of Ratatouille, but not the same concept. Obviously, he's
right.
a chef in Paris, but yeah, Ratatouille is one of my favorite movies, cartoon movies, I should say. But
I love that
yeah,
movie. Oh
yeah,
my gosh. Did you see the joke? I think it was on, I can't remember where it was, where, they were having the Olympics and someone said, hey, they tweeted, I think, what did France do with all the rats? Where did all the rats
mm,
go? Because it's infamous for having kind of a problem. And
mm.
someone tweeted back, you're being silly. They're at the Olympic Stadium cooking for all the athletes. And I just
Yeah,
thought that was
nice,
hilarious. I
very
love that
nice.
movie so much.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, and
good.
it's a great story. It's a great
Yeah.
story. Plus, I
Oh,
love
so
cooking, so
sweet.
it's
Yeah.
good to see something like that.
Yes.
Well, Kirsten, I do want to thank you again for stepping to Dave's head. And as I've said this season, have a great 2024. And I look forward to coming onto your podcast too.
Yes. Yay, me too. Thanks for having me on. This has been really fun.
My favorite segment on my podcast is my GRIN, which stands for Great Reason to Be in Love with Now. Before we talk about the great reason to be in love with now for this episode, check out Opus Clip. Opus Clip is the #1 AI video clipping and editing tool that repurposes your long videos into viral short videos in just one click. For more information, visit rebrand.ly/DHPOPUS. That's rebrand.ly/DHPOPUS. So Kirsten and I talked about magic and miracles. I'm actually going to try to start using that because I love that phrasing, by the way. And our connection to the universe and so much more during our interview. And while I've stated many times on this podcast that I'm not religious, I'm spiritual, that belief isn't as superficial as the vagueness of spiritual implies. I do think there are things, explainable and unexplainable, that occur that very well could be signs. TheDreamCatch.com published an article in 2023 entitled 9 Signs from the Universe, How to Understand and Apply Them in Your Life. They say even if we aren't asking for it, the universe always speaks to us, but only some people pick up on the messages. Others are distracted and live disconnected lives that aren't aligned, with the flow of life, making them miss the writing on the wall. Now, they reference a quote from Oprah Winfrey. I feel like I've been using Oprah a lot lately, but who once said that life whispers to us all the time, and if you don't get the whisper, it gets louder and becomes a pebble or a thump in the head. She explains, and here's the actual quote: "The pebble or the thump upside the head usually means it's going into a problem. If you don't pay attention to the problem, the pebble then becomes like a brick. The brick upside your head is a crisis, and if you don't pay attention to the brick upside your head, the crisis turns into a disaster, and the whole house, brick wall, comes falling down." It's interesting how that quote develops, by the way, where it goes from a pebble to a thump to a brick to the entire wall. And it talks about the evolution of problems festering, essentially, right? And whether that sign comes from the universe or comes from your normal human observation or lack thereof, acting on problems that you see, it's kind of the snowball thing, right? The snowball effect. It starts as a little snowball and it keeps rolling and keeps rolling and keeps picking up stuff being more snow. And next thing you know, you got this big boulder going downhill faster than something you can stop. And so they talk about ignoring signs from the universe can cause the brick walls of our lives to crash. We can avoid this by familiarizing ourselves with common signs and interpreting them in ways that make sense. They continue by looking for these 9 signs from the universe and deciphering its messages. You can tap into its frequency and improve your life. And so we'll talk about the 9 signs from the universe to guide you on your journey. We'll talk about those 9 right now. Number 1, they say significant people or chance meetings. They say guidance often comes to us in the form of people. Someone enters our lives at the right time and reveals the next steps. Perhaps you meet a random person with an idea or a message that sparks a deep understanding within you, or it reawakens a long-held dream. Quote, synchronistic meetings, look that one up, can also happen when you start thinking of someone like a friend from high school and you suddenly hear from them. Now, I will say absolutely. There are times that I think of people and next thing you know, I get a text from them. Or there are times that I think of them, and very rarely because people just generally don't call me. They usually text me. But every once in a while, I'll think of someone and they'll call me. I don't typically associate that with a connection or a sign from the universe, but I do look at it as something that happens. And when it does happen, it's like, I was just thinking about you. Or, isn't that something? I just thought about you, and boom, you text me. But what they're saying is that guidance also comes in the form of people. Maybe it's a grounding that person normally has from you. Or you're kind of chaotic in life and someone hits you up who changes your mindset, distracts you from the busyness or chaotic life you're living right then. And so that could be a universal connection. Number 2, sudden or random thoughts. Having a thought pop into your head out of nowhere is another way the universe can speak to you. The universe must be speaking to me every damn day then. But sudden thoughts can also be telepathic. You might have a random idea about your mom. This could be a sign that she needs your support and love, and you sense that. Now, this kind of goes back to number 1 a little bit, but there are sometimes you think of someone and you call them, right? Kind of the opposite of number 1. Or you think of someone, you text them, hey, just checking on you. I do that all the time, by the way, for my friends. I'll just text them, hey, checking in, how's everything going? Or, oh, we haven't talked in a minute, what's going on? Or I'll just, very rarely, certain people I call because we actually have conversations and speak. But most of the time it's just text. But it could be a sign that they needed to hear from you. They needed your advice. They needed your support. They needed to hear your love, right? Number 3, and this one has been weird this week. Dreams. Dreams are the most intriguing signs because of their vividness and mystery. While science views dreams as nothing more than the subconscious mind processing things while asleep, spiritualists see dreams as a portal connecting us to the collective consciousness. They continue, some dreams can make absolutely no sense, which are like mine every time I do actually dream. Plenty of resources can help us interpret dreams, but ultimately, you must make sense of what the dream is saying to you based on what you're currently dealing with or the themes in your life you're reckoning with. Now, I would say this week, the dreams that I have been just odd. The people in them, the situations, just odd, made no sense. And most of them I forgot as soon as I wake up. And normally I don't even remember them half the time anyway, but the ones I did remember, I remembered for about 5-10 minutes and then fell asleep. And the only reason I'm referring to them now is because a couple of them I actually do remember, because I do this thing where if I don't want to forget, I just keep thinking about it as I'm kind of waking up and walking around or doing whatever I'm doing. I kind of keep repeating the dream in my mind or parts of it. That way I remember what it was about. And so maybe that's the universe telling me that, hey, this is important to you, or this topic or this theme or whatever. And that's triggering me to say, hey, you need to remember this. You need to remember this. But I don't dream that often. So I kind of feel like every time I dream, it's either my body or mind trying to tell me something. Number 4, interesting story about this one after I talk about it. Number or sequences of numbers. Humans may have conceived of numbers, but the universe still uses them to speak to us, right? Seeing specific sequences or patterns on clocks, license plates, and telephone numbers, residential addresses indicates a hidden message, especially if you're seeing them frequently. They continue, you could also come across significant numbers such as your lucky number, birthday, or anniversary dates. That last one, very interesting story from this past weekend. I'm in DC at a conference or meeting, and I have to connect to the facility's free Wi-Fi. Their free Wi-Fi issues a passcode for you to connect to their Wi-Fi based on your email address and this generated password. Well, of all the 4-digit numbers to be generated for my password, it happened to be the anniversary date of my prior marriage. And so, talk about growth. I more like chuckle, like, that's interesting. And then life continued. Whereas a couple years ago, that might have triggered me in some bad way, distracted me for minutes or an hour or so, or hours. But growth has me just kind of chuckling, like, that's about as random as it gets of all the numbers in the world. Because if you do statistics, 4-digit number, you have 9 cubed or squared. 9 to the fourth power possibilities. And I get that date. But it was interesting to come across. Number 5, and this is where I think I'm the most connected, songs. Have you ever listened to a song that struck a chord with you? If you're hearing the same song repeatedly, or if a song keeps playing in your head, there could be synchronistic forces at play. When you ask for guidance, you may get your answer from a song that suddenly plays on the radio, or a song you remember from your past. If you're open to it, you could also use a shuffle function on your playlist to see what songs start playing. Now, first of all, anytime I listen to any of my Spotify playlists, I listen to them on random. Because I don't want them to play in the order that I added them. That's just weird to me. Put it on random. It's a playlist of 300. I don't want to hear the same 12 songs every time when I hit play. But I do find frequently, very frequently, that I come across a song that gets stuck in my head and it's just literally stuck there. It's just stuck. Like I sing it all day. I hum it all night. It just gets stuck in my head. And so maybe I'll start thinking a little more about why that happens, because it happens very frequently. Music, that happens a lot. And actually math gets stuck in my head. I don't talk about math out loud, but math gets stuck in my head a lot. Number 6, delays, setbacks, roadblocks, and detours. Viewing obstacles as signs from the universe can feel counterintuitive. They continue, instead of forcing things to happen just because you want something to work in your favor, take a step back and think about what the universe might be trying to tell you through the rejections and delays. Very key line here. When we take a detour, we must consider all available options and look for alternatives we have yet to consider. I actually love this one. This might be my favorite of the 9, because there's a saying, setback for a comeback, right? Or in order for you to realize your potential or realize your goals, sometimes you have to get knocked down so you can get back up. There's so many sayings and those types of things out there. But sometimes I wonder, when we do have a setback, a detour, a roadblock, delays, if we actually take time to analyze why that delay could be happening. And I think it's important to look at why these detours happen. When you get a detour, consider the alternatives, especially the ones you might not have considered before, because that could be the pathway forward. Number 7, got a story about this. We talked about this in the interview. Animals and nature. The universe can communicate powerfully by using the natural elements around you. They continue. Animals or animal behaviors can signify things to come, a lesson, or an unfulfilled desire. What the hell do frogs mean? Why are there frogs sitting on my front door almost every night? They haven't done it recently, but for a while it was every single night. Frogs. Why? Somebody help me out there. Number 8, intuition or gut feelings. Now, before I start, I know female intuition, y'all way up here, we down here. I get it. Your intuition, when well honed, is a strong medium for messages from the universe. Our unconscious minds are more in sync with it than we think, and we must trust and follow it. Those gut feelings and sensations are higher forces indicating what's happening around you and asking you to be mindful. Very interesting. I think this might be my second favorite one of the 9, because I think as we progress through life, our instincts, our gut feelings, our intuition gets a little more refined as we go. Our ability to actually recognize that's what's triggered and that's what's happening, that's what the sensation or the feeling is, and making decisions based on it, I don't think follows and paces the refinement of those things. And I say that because they say some people, right, the older you get, the dumber you get. I don't know if you heard that, but I've heard that before. It's speaking to more so the pollution, if you will, of the good and bad that's happened in your life and how you apply it to your decision making, where sometimes you use the good, you use the lessons you've learned, you use the intellect you've gained to make real decisions that benefit you. Conversely, you look at the opposite. You use the bag to be hesitant, right? You don't trust the decision making anymore. And so now you miss the turn, you miss the waypoint, you miss the opportunities that life presents itself. And so you have to be in tune. I think this might be the one where I say you need to be most in tune with your intuition or gut feelings, because they can either scare you away or guide you in the wrong direction, or they can be very evidence-based, based on your past, based on your observations, based on your people skills, based on so much more to make correct decisions for you. I spent the most time on that one. That's my second favorite, but it resonates with me because I'm very intuitional, if that makes sense. Very gut feeling-ish. With the exception, and I'll say this, I'm very gut feeling-ish, but I do my spreadsheets, if that makes sense. And anybody knows me when I'm talking about, I have spreadsheets for all big decisions in life. I do weighted scores, I do pros and cons, I put values on all the criteria related to that decision, and then I come up with a value. And if it's as simple as yes or no, yes will have a value, no will have a value, whichever one is the highest. If it's a choice between multiple things, then I'll go through all my different important factors around this decision. Whichever one of those X number of things has the highest score, that's the one that wins. But the gut feeling gets me started in that process, if that makes sense. Lastly, synchronicity and coincidental occurrences. Say that 10 times. Synchronicities are a big yes and a big thumbs up to confirm that you're on the right track, align with your vision for the future, and that you should proceed with what you're doing. The fun part is that the more you notice synchronicities, the more these events will happen in your life. Now, again, this talks to connection, right? Synchronicities is the story that Kirsten talked about, where she was walking down the road and the lady was picking up the furniture and she was going to be missing her because she couldn't find out where she was going, or she didn't know where she was going. She was lost. The synchronicity is telling her to walk outside to meet up with this woman to get her to her destination to pick up the items, right? But it's also noticing that those things are happening, that connection is happening. And so check out the article on thedreamcatch.com. It's entitled 9 Signs from the Universe, How to Understand and Apply Them to Your Life. It's an interesting concept, and it does require a little bit that you believe in those connections in the universe, that you believe in the spirituality of it or the synchronicity of it, right? We all have our different beliefs. There are things that happen for a reason. There are some things that are just happenstance. And whether we choose which side or the other is really up to us. I want to thank Kirsten Rudberg for stepping into Dave's head and having an in-depth conversation. First of all, the story she told about growing up as, I can't even think of the name of it right now, but growing up as, what is it called? I can't think of it right now, but it'll come back to me. A third culture kid. That's right. Growing up as a third culture kid, which when you think about it, having that experience and then being shocked, ice water to the face, as I like to call that shock, when you come to the U.S. and you spend that time and you see what people are like outside of where you grew up, and think about all the people around the world who don't have that experience. The people who we talked about who don't travel at all. They've seen the same square 50 miles in their life. Never experienced other cultures outside of what the TV tells them they're supposed to be like. Or their friend that had one bad experience or 2 bad experiences tells them they should be like. And that's why it's so encouraging to travel more, to see a lot of this world. And that's why one of the reasons I want to retire and travel is because there's so much beauty in this world to see. But I want to thank her for stepping into Dave's head. Check out her Instagram, Bite Size Blessings Pod. Check out our website, bitesizeblessings.com, and maybe even check me out on our podcast soon. Something we still got to talk about and discuss, but love to jump on and talk about my experiences as well. Support our sponsors and partners, SRE Solutions, Inc., for all your PC support, website design, networking, so many other things. Check them out at rebrand.ly/DHPSRE. Check out Adapt to Adopt for all things adoption, support, and living, and so much more. Check out rebrand.ly/DHPA2A. And check out our partner Opus Clip. If you have clips that you like to put on social media or use AI to generate small little clips of, check them out at rebrand.ly/DHPOpus. That's DHPOPUS. And if you're interested in sponsoring or partnering with Dave's Head, reach out to me on any of my social media and we can make it happen. Lastly, this season, we talk about leaving you with a quote to cap each episode. This one I thought was the perfect quote for this episode, and it's by Thich Nhat Hanh. Go look it up. Thich Nhat Hanh. I actually spelled that phonetically on my script, just so I would not mess that one up. Here's a quote. Enlightenment for a wave in the ocean is the moment the wave realizes it is water. When we realize we are not separate, but a part of the huge ocean of everything, we become enlightened. We realize this through practice, and we remain awake and aware of this through more practice. Again, that's Thich Nhat Hanh. He was a Vietnamese monk known as the father of mindfulness and a major influence on Western practices of Buddhism. He's also a peace activist who died in 2022 at the young age of 95. So nurture, synchronicity, and signs. All great reasons to be in love with now. That's all for this episode of Dave's Head. New episodes released on the second and fourth Friday of the month. For all things Dave's Head, check out our website at daveshead.card.co. Subscribe to watch new episodes on YouTube or Spotify video, or to listen via your preferred podcast player, go to anchor.fm/Dave's Head Pod. Thank you for watching or listening. As always, enjoy life, because life should be fun. Take care.